Okay, let's talk about how to attach our binding to our panel by hand. So there's another video which shows you how to do it by machine. Personally, I usually use the technique where I machine bind onto the front of the fabric and then hand bind at the reverse. I always hand finish my quilts, but I usually machine attach the front. Okay, but let's assume you don't want to pull a sewing machine out, or you don't have a sewing machine. How do we do the binding by hand? The process we use, okay, is as follows. So in the kits, I make my own binding for you, and so it comes in this format where it's just folded in half. So if I zoom in a bit, we can see here. Okay, so that's just been folded in half, and that's ready for machine attaching it to our quilt. However, we do need to slightly change it. We use the same binding, but we do need to do some ironing with it to slightly adjust it for hand attachments. So this is how it comes in the pack, and this is what we're going to do to it to make it ready for hand stitching. Okay, so what we do is, so it's folded like so, okay, and with an iron what you need to do is you need to carefully go along and take each side and fold it in on itself so it kind of meets in the middle. It doesn't have to meet right in the middle, okay? So I've got a little bit of a gap there, you can see. It doesn't really matter what the distance is from the middle, okay, although I'd keep it within about 3-4 millimeters. I usually do it within 1 or 2. What does matter is that it's pretty even all the way along, otherwise your bindings start to be wavy. But maybe you like wavy, I don't know. So when we've then done the pressing like that, we can fold it in on itself and repress it again, so we get quite a nice neat fold like so. So on the inside we've got our raw edges, on the outside we've only got just neat folds of fabric. Okay, now what we're going to do is, let me just zoom back out again so you can see where I'm doing this from. Okay, so this is my panel. Okay, I've got all my binding here, and I provide enough binding to go all the way around plus another length of it, so we've got plenty. You do need to have a crossover of fabric there as well in the binding, okay, for how we join it all together. So if you have a look on here, this point here is where it all joins up, so it looks like it's all basically seamless. Okay, so let's get going with this. So I'm going to be using my smaller needle, and I'm using my hand sewing thread here. Okay, now there's a few different ways that we can help ourselves here. Okay, now I'm going to leave quite a tail, so that's probably what, about 4 or 5 inches of tail there, and I'm actually going to start sewing here and work my way all around that way. Okay, and what will happen is by the time it gets all the way round, there'll be enough there to have a crossover, and that's where we will do a little bit of engineering to make that fold into each other so that we've got a really seamless finish there. Okay, but for now I'm going to show you how we do the hand sewing. So what we're going to do is we're going to hand stitch it onto the front first, okay, with my needle and thread, and I use these little kind of like binder clips, but equally you can use little bulldog clips if you want to, but I only need 1 or 2, or you can use pins, or you can just hold it in place, it's fine. Okay, So I want to open up my binding. I want to put my panel so that the center fold is right on the edge there, okay? And so I can attach this onto the binding there. So I'm going to zoom back in for filming this bit. Okay. So the back is going to be attached on there, and then the front is attached there. Okay, and I just want to make sure that that's not just kind of just hanging on the edge there. I want to definitely have that right down the centre of my fold. Pull that over, okay. And I'm going to use my little, I think they're called Wonder Clips or something like that. I could be totally making that up though. I apologise. They're used in quilting all the time, little clips. Okay, so I'm just going to hold that in place there. I'm actually going to use 2 and hold that other end just for now because it will just get in my way, particularly while I'm starting. Okay, and I'm going to start about here. Okay, so what am I, about 3 inches from the bottom end? Okay, I don't want to start on a corner, okay, and I don't really want to start in the middle. If this was a really large quilt, then you can start in the middle. You just always want to be at least kind of 4 inches really from an edge, because of the bit that we're going to do in a minute, join it all back up together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just take my needle. Let me bring the camera up a bit closer. There we go. Okay, just have to lean in. There we go. Okay, so what I've got is my needle here. Okay, and I'm going to just do a really simple little running stitch which just catches. I don't go all the way through. I'm just going to catch that wadding, okay, when I go through, and I'm going to just come up here and just catch a couple of little kind of strands of thread on my binding each time. So I'm going to go in. So first of all, I usually start by just catching the needle in the gap there. I've also put a knot, in my thread. I've already threaded up. Okay, so that's now caught in there. I can make sure I get that in the right place. If I get it wrong to start off with, it all goes wrong. Get it right to start off with. Take a bit longer just to make sure that's in place. And then what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go where my thread is coming out here. I'm just going to go straight down into the wadding, and I just go along maybe kind of like 4 millimeters through the wadding and just come up, that's going to zoom in, just come up and get a couple of threads right on that edge there, and it's going to get caught on there. I know it is. There we go. And then just pull that. Okay, and I'm just going to work my way all the way around here, and I will work through where things are getting a little bit thicker. So I'm obviously coming up to the applique section here, so I'm just going to make sure I catch that in there. I don't think I've got quite enough of the binding there. That's it. There's a little sweet spot that you'll find in the binding, which is with the bit you want to catch it. There. Actually, that's a little bit too far over, so I'll probably be able to see that stitch a bit more. Okay, that's better. Now, some people like to make sure the stitching is very, very neat and even all the way round. I do mine pretty neatly and evenly, but I don't measure it. An old trick actually is with a bit of nail varnish or a bit of a marker pen, you can draw a line on your thumb. I've never actually done it. Why don't we do it now? Let's find something. Draw it with a pencil, okay? And just draw where your stitch comes out and where it's going to go back in on your thumb. So I don't know if that's zooming in. No, it's not focusing, but you can see I've drawn a little line on my thumb. Move that up there. I'm going to remove that one now. And let's see if I can make my stitches even more even. I'd probably not use a pencil because the thickness of the line is different. So I'm going to go through there and I'm going to come up where the mark is on my thumb nail. And then you just move your thumb along each time so you know where you're supposed to come back up. Now if or when, because these aren't continuous pieces of binding, sorry, sometimes you've got these joins. Sorry, I've gone off camera. You've got these joins here. What you want to do is sometimes I'll do a stitch just either side of it just to make sure it's holding together, because that is a potential weak point. So we're back on the camera. So I've got my thumb with my stitch mark there, starting point, and my finish point comes up just there. So in theory, move my thumb along. All my stitches will be even, if that's something that is important to me. Job well done. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to carry on sewing, and when I get to the corner I'm going to show you how we work with a mitered corner. Okay, so you can see I've stitched all the way along to almost to the end. I actually like to go almost to the edge, so this is different to machine binding. I'm going to go almost to the edge, maybe about 2-3 millimeters from the edge there. Okay, I'm going to remove the clip, and I'm just going to do a little holding stitch, just to a double stitch there, just to make sure that holds in place. I might even do it another time just to make sure. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, okay, is what we want to have, we want to have a nice mitered corner here. Okay, we could do these all as separate lengths if we wanted to, but actually we can do it all in one piece. And what I'm just doing is I'm just manipulating this. I'm opening the spare bit, the bit that's about to go along there, up, okay, and I'm just kind of holding that in place there, okay, and then getting the creased line, the outside edge along there, okay. What I can do is I can clip this into place, okay. Roughly, there's going to be a little bit of manipulation going on here and adjusting, so I'll keep that there. And then what I want to do is just, with something suitable, I'm going to just hold that in place, tuck that under a wee bit more, I think. There we go, we've got that really neat miter just there, okay. And with my needle I'm just going to come back along here. I'm just going to catch through my front panel a bit of my wadding through this edge that's gone here, and I'm going to for the first time catch that mitered corner just there. Okay, so it's just going to hold that in place, and I will do a really small double stitch there. Okay, so that's now holding that in place. Okay, and then we can then miter it on the other side once we get to that point. Okay, and what I'm doing now is I'm just going to go back into the back into the front panel, just catching that, and I'm going up a couple of millimeters, maybe 3-4 millimeters up here. Okay, depending on how big this panel is, depends on how many stitches I would do here. And I'm just going to catch that there, just with a tiny little stitch just to hold that in place. I'm going to go up a wee bit further. I like to tend to put in 2 stitches just to hold this all neatly in place. And then I go back down through that point that I've just stitched through the wadding, and I'm going to come up back in that corner there. All good to go again, but I'm coming up in the panel. Whistling away there. Okay, now this is just come unfolded there, but we can just, that will get stitched in when we fold it all back together later. Okay, now I want to move my clip up a wee bit because it's just going to get in my way a bit. So what I'll do is because I've got 2, I'm going to put one in there to hold it in place there and take that one off, so I can now got the freedom to move around there, and I can now carry on stitching up here. So if you were following me along and you were keeping up, that's fabulous, but if not, it's I've been doing this for a long time. Sorry, moved off camera. I've been doing this for a long time, so I might do these things more quickly than I think I'm doing them. So please pause the video, rewind it, do it as many times as you need, okay, in order to get all those mitered corners in. That's really annoying me, so I'm going to clip it in place there. Okay, that makes it a bit easier. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch all the way round now. Okay, obviously I'm going to pause the video because I'm hand stitching this, so I'm going to go all the way around my panel, and then when I get to so that's where I started. When I get to about here, okay, so I've got a good kind of like 4 inches there, I'm going to stop there, okay, so that we can do the next stage, and that's what I'll come back. When we come back, that's where I'll be up to in this video. Okay. Okay, so I have sewn, so that was where we started off with the sewing, and I'm now up to this point here. What I'm just going to do is finish off sewing here, and then I will show you the technique that we use for joining all of this together. So let me zoom it in. So the back at this point hasn't been attached on, it's just still all loose at the back. We'll do that after we've done this joining technique. Okay, so just finishing off here, so I'm just going to do a little stitch here and do a double stitch just to hold it in place. Okay, and then I'm going to tie my knot as we were doing before with the quilting, by wrapping around the needle. I'm just going through the centre of the quilt, not through to the back, and I'll just pull that through. There we go. And then we can trim that down. So what do we do next? So what I'm going to do, I've got my 2 ends here, okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to join these together so we have a seamless join here, okay. Now to do that, now I've given you extra length than you need, okay, and what I want you to do, it seems scary, but from the longer end, just cut off, say about 1 inch, okay. and then we want to open that up. Okay, so we've got our kind of like creases on one side and the folds on the inside, but they're definitely, so we know which is kind of like the cut edge and which is the binding edges. So what we want to do is where we're going to, basically I'm going to just pull the longer tail out of the way, okay, and along here about in the middle between where I finished stitching and where I started stitching earlier on, I'm going to lay this with my folds that way. Okay, so we've got the actual width of the binding, open width, full width of the binding that way. Okay, so the middle crease is about in the middle there, and I'm going to lay this over there, and then where that right hand edge of the bit that we've cut is, that's my cutting point for here. So I'm going to cut this down to there, being careful not to cut your quilt. Okay, so if you've got a little bit too over, like I did there, we can adjust this for the next bit. Okay, okay, so where the right hand edge is of the piece that we cut, that's where we want to cut this piece. Okay, so being careful not to, just to cut the bits that you need. Just going to cut through there. So in theory, this part here, the overlap between the right hand side and the left hand side is the same as the width of our opened out binding. So we can get rid of that now. Okay, and we can get rid of all of our tails. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to join these two together. Okay, so there's a couple of steps in this process. So the first thing I do is I want to, because I'm going to be hand stitching this all together like so, it can be a bit difficult to do if this is just fully open. So I actually just fold this on itself, okay, and put a needle in just here, just to temporarily hold it in place. I tend to put the tail end of the needle in the quilt a wee bit so I'm less likely to stab myself. So we've just got this shortened edge here temporarily. Okay, what I then want to do, this is where it can get a bit complicated, so just pause this video as many times as you need to. Okay, I now want to open out both edges, both ends of our binding. Okay, and we have a right side, or the face of it, the side that is going to be shown, and then we've got the back of it. Okay, so the back of it has got the creases, the outside of it has got the folds. That's how I kind of describe it. What I want to do is put folds to folds together. So I take my two open pieces, and this is fiddly, I have to say. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I've got my two pieces like this, and I'm going to take face to face, I'm going to join this corner here, okay, onto that corner there, so it goes like so. Okay, and I want to hold that in place. Just twist this around a wee bit. Okay, and while that is in place there, I'm just going to put a needle, sorry, a pin, to hold it in place. Okay, so those are together nicely just there. That's held there. And then what I want to do, this is where it gets more awkward, and actually the longer you leave this gap, the easier this is. I always seem to do it with a 4-inch gap, and I always think, oh, this is really awkward. Maybe one day I'll remember and I'll actually leave a 10-inch gap and it'll be a lot easier. So I now need to flatten this out so it's basically creating this square or diamond, depending on which angle you're looking at this. And I need to pin this in place here. so that our edges are lining up there and there. And what we're going to do is we're going to hand stitch diagonally across there. Now if you're not sure, okay, it's not going that way, okay, we want to go that way across, then you can just draw on with a pencil or pen, whatever, that line. Personally, I would do it in a pencil or a fabric pen that disappears, because you may see it. So I'm just going to lay that there. I'm going to get a ruler. Okay, and just on here, I'm just going to have to lean on there. It's going to be a bit awkward, or I could put something in between. Got a little book here, just notebook to lean on. I'm just going to draw my line from that corner to that corner, and that's where I want to stitch them together. Like so. So there's my stitch line. Okay, if you feel like you need to put more pins in to hold it in place, then do so. Okay, now mine's moving off by about 1 millimetre maybe sometimes, but I'm okay with that. If it's much more than that, then it could be an issue. Okay, now I'm going to go back to read my book, take my needle and thread. And at this point I am going to do a really small running stitch. Okay, this is about the only time when I'm hand stitching where I'm making sure I'm kind of really wanting to replicate what you can do on a sewing machine at this point. So I'm just going to hold that in place. And I'm going to sew along this line here. Just put in a couple of back stitches. I'm just going to sew along that line neatly with pretty small stitches. You can do them all one at a time. Or not. And I'm loading up. I'm just taking my time, not trying to rush it. I want to pull that so that and just make sure it just lays flat. So you can start to see the stitches. As I said, my thread's pretty matched actually to this grey. So that's a bit of a bigger stitch. Rein yourself back in, Perrin. If I can work out how to fast forward a video, I will fast forward this bit, otherwise you can forward on to the next bit if you want to. Old school. And now my needle's unthreaded. Okay. So back to it. Just checking that that's lining up there. Okay. Yep. I'm okay with that. Make sure it's not pulling it. just finish with a back stitch. And just tie it off as well. Just cut that, don't cut it right down to the knot. Okay, so in theory, this looks too long at the moment, but that's because we've got this all, well, we've got this pinned together. Okay, what we're going to do, okay, if you're not sure, pin this and just check. Yeah, so this is about the right length there. Okay, what we're going to do now, okay, is so we've got, it's important you cut the right bit here. Okay, so we've got our triangle bits and then we've got the two bits joined. We want to cut the triangle off, and we want to leave about 1/4 inch seam there, so we're not cutting right up to that hand sewn section. Okay, so we've got this little bit here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just warm my hands up, they're pretty cold at the moment, is I'm going to finger press this open like so. We were doing the finger pressing earlier, weren't we, if you did the applique bit. So I'm just getting that as a nice crease there. And then I'm going to pull it and refold it back on itself, making sure that my fold is open. If it's open, we're going to get a, sorry, just pull that back down here. If that's folded back onto itself, reopen it and press it down there, because if that's flat, we're going to get a flatter crease and finish on this. Okay, if it's folding in on itself, just push it back again. You show it. There we go, it's all nice and open. Fold down here and then fold back on itself, and then now we're ready. We can pin this in place if it's a bit, it's having a life of its own here. Okay, nice. I'm gonna pop, got my little bulldog clip up here that I can use as well. I don't have to have all the fancy clips. So that's just nicely in place there, ready to finish with my hand stitching along there, which I will do now. And in the last video for this section, then we will look at how to attach the binding. If you've already done this by hand, then attaching the binding will be very straightforward. Okay.